It's fun to go in there and see what you can do, how you can make it, even if it's not a song you wrote. In country music, where stars come and go like the sound of a steel guitar, George Strait's name has always stood out. Fans have trusted him as a cowboy for more than 50 years. He was a quiet man whose singing and songs told stories of love, heartbreak, and strength. However, in 2025, George Strait's name is once again all over the news, and everyone knows what he does. Not for a show or an award, but for something much more important. The king of country broke his quiet in a way that fans didn't expect at age 72. Nashville is still reeling from this latest news. There is a lot of talk on social media, and millions of loyal fans are asking if this is the end of a story that changed modern country music. The cowboy's voice used to be very steady, but now it has a weight of truth that can't be ignored. For what reason did George Strait just tell the world something that is shaking country music to its core? To understand why the latest news about George Strait is making waves, you need to look at Strait himself. Strait was born on May 18, 1952 in Poteet, Texas. His story could only have been written in the heart of the Lone Star State. He wasn't raised in Hollywood and wasn't taught how to be famous. As a child, he worked on his family's cattle land, getting up early to do chores. He learned early on that humility and hard work were more important than flashing lights and loud cheers. He was a shy and quiet boy who never bragged or tried to get attention. But even when he was a child, there was a fire for music under that cowboy hat. George started playing the guitar in high school, but not with the goal of selling out arenas. He did it just to pass the time and calm his mind. In the 1960s, rock and roll was the most popular music style, but Strait turned to country music, which made people think of dusty roads and long drives. He looked up to Merle Haggard, George Jones, and Bob Wills. He was different because he didn't want to change with the times, even though Nashville and outlaw country rows were moving toward pop music. George Strait stayed true to the pure traditional sound by combining heartfelt songs with honky-tonk swing. He joined the U.S. Army and married Norma, his high school girlfriend. It looked like he would be able to settle down and enjoy a quiet life of family and service, but bad luck wasn't done with him yet. While George was stationed in Hawaii, he joined the Army-sponsored band Rambling Country. It was there that he found his smooth, steady, and very Texan voice wasn't just good, it was unforgettable. So he could finish college. He went back home and played small places with his band, Ace in the Hole. Music City shut the door on him for years, telling him that traditional country music was dead and that his style had no future. George, on the other hand, was stubborn and wouldn't change. Because he was so tough, he quickly became the undisputed king of the country. By 1981, George Strait had his first big hit with Unwound. He never looked back after that. Over the next 4 decades, he had more #1 songs than any other artist in history, even more than Elvis Presley. He became a symbol of real country music. George was successful, but he never showed it off. And he didn't look for stories or tabloids. His music spoke for him because he didn't like to talk much. That's why today's breaking headlines carry such weight, because George Strait was never one to make noise without reason. If the king of country is speaking out now, then it must be something deeper than music, something that reaches into the soul of who he really is. The cowboy has lifted his hat, and the world is about to see the man beneath it in ways they never imagined. But what truths does that hat conceal? And why is George finally ready to let them be known? Behind the glitter of George Strait's chart-topping success lies a story marked by both unimaginable triumphs and crushing tragedies. While the world saw a man who seemed unshakable, always smiling beneath that cowboy hat, those closest to him knew that George carried scars no fame or fortune could ever erase. The most devastating of them came on June 25, 1986, when his only daughter, Jennifer, just 13 years old, was killed in a car accident outside San Marcos, Texas. The loss shattered him. Friends said George changed overnight. The cheerful laughter dimmed, and the man who once loved to talk to fans and press became silent, retreating into himself. He stopped giving interviews for years, letting his music be the only way he expressed his grief. Songs like Baby Blue and You'll Be There became coded messages of heartbreak, tributes hidden in melody to the daughter he could never bring back. Fans sang along without always realizing they were part of a father's morning prayer. Yet even in his silence, George pressed on, determined not to let tragedy define his legacy. He leaned on Norma, his wife since 1971, the woman who had been his anchor since high school. While other stars fell into scandal, substance abuse, and broken marriages, George clung to family, faith, and the stage. Every performance, every chart-topping single was a way to outrun the pain, to prove that even the hardest loss couldn't silence his voice. But grief is a shadow that never leaves. When George Strait walked onto the stage, fans saw confidence, charisma, and cowboy cool. What they didn't see was a man who would often cry alone before a show, or the way he sometimes gripped the microphone stand just a little tighter when a lyric struck too close to home. Triumph and tragedy became inseparable parts of his life. He broke records no one thought possible. Over 60 #1 singles, countless platinum albums, and a stadium career that outlived 3 generations of artists. And yet, no matter how many crowds roared his name, there was always an empty seat in his heart where his daughter should have been. That private pain became part of his legend, proof that the king of country wasn't just a singer of sorrow. He lived it. In light of the breaking headlines that have once again placed George Strait at the center of public attention, fans can't help but remember how tragedy shaped him before. If he's speaking now, it must mean he has carried another burden all this time, one he can no longer keep silent. The question is, what has George Strait been holding back? And is the world finally ready to hear the truth from a man who rarely speaks of himself at all? George Strait built a career on being the steady hand in a stormy industry, where others stumbled into scandals, where peers made headlines for arrests, divorces, and feuds. George became known as the cowboy who never wavered, but what the public rarely saw were the hidden struggles that followed him behind the curtain. Fame may have looked easy on him, but it came at a price. His relentless touring schedule took a toll not only on his health, but also on his spirit. He spent decades on the road, sleeping in buses, staring out of hotel windows, and longing for the quiet Texas nights he left behind. Those close to him whispered that George battled bouts of exhaustion so severe that some nights he had to push himself just to step onto the stage. His strong, unshaken image hid the fact that he was human, aging, and vulnerable to the same doubts and aches as any man. Rumors of health scares have followed him for years, whispers of heart strain and surgeries, though George never entertained them in public. Instead, he tightened his circle, choosing silence over confession. Nashville insiders say that silence wasn't just about privacy, it was about survival. For George, admitting weakness would be like letting down the fans who saw him as indestructible, the king who never faltered. But the silence also came from grief, from the heavy losses that had marked his personal life and left him scarred. The death of his daughter lingered in every decision, shaping how guarded he became. Even the music industry itself tested him. While country music drifted into pop influences, George had to fight to keep traditional sounds alive. Executives pushed him to bend, to adapt, to become more commercial, but he resisted. That resistance earned him respect, but it also made him a target. He was the stubborn cowboy, the immovable star in a world that wanted change. Add to that the quiet pain of aging in an industry obsessed with youth, and George carried more than fans ever realized. He hid struggles with weariness, pressure, and the weight of a legacy that seemed impossible to carry alone. Every time he strapped on his guitar, the question haunted him. How long could he keep this up? How long before the weight of silence, tragedy, and expectation became too much? And now, with the breaking headlines, fans wonder if those hidden struggles have finally caught up to him, forcing him to speak at last. The cowboy who never cracked is showing signs of a truth that can no longer be contained. But what exactly has he revealed that makes this moment different from all the rest? And then it happened. The man who had spent a lifetime keeping his private life under lock and key finally spoke. George Strait, the king of country. The quiet cowboy who rarely gave interviews and almost never addressed personal matters broke his silence with words that sent shockwaves through Nashville and far beyond. In a heartfelt statement that quickly spread across television networks, radio stations, and social media feeds, George admitted what many had only whispered about behind closed doors. His time on the stage is drawing to a close, but not just because of age. He revealed that ongoing health concerns, ones he had kept private for years, have forced him to reconsider the demands of performing, recording, and living under the weight of a legacy larger than life itself. Fans who had long believed he was invincible suddenly saw him as a man facing battles no cowboy hat could conceal. He admitted that years of touring, thousands of shows, and endless hours of strain had taken a toll. His voice, still powerful, carried the ache of weariness. His body, though strong, had limits, and for the first time, George Strait admitted he was listening to those limits. The announcement didn't stop at health. George also revealed that he had been carrying another truth, one that had haunted him for decades. He spoke candidly about the silence he chose after losing his daughter, explaining that his retreat wasn't just grief, it was also guilt. He believed he should have done more, been there more, fought harder to keep her safe. That admission cut deep because for fans, George had always been the rock, the unshaken symbol of strength. Now he was telling them he had spent nearly 40 years living with regret. Nashville erupted. Radio DJs interrupted regular programming, news anchors paused to recount his career, and fans rushed to stadiums and honky-tonks to play his songs. This wasn't just another celebrity revelation. It was the king of country finally lifting his hat and showing the man underneath. His words raised questions no one had dared to ask before. Was this a farewell? Was George Strait preparing to walk away forever? And if so, would this final revelation be the moment that defined his legacy more than the records, more than the sold-out shows, more than the cowboy image that had stood tall for 5 decades? The world had waited years for him to speak. Now that he had, they were left with more questions than answers. What comes next for George Strait? And is this truly the end of the Cowboys' ride? The moment George Strait's revelation hit the airwaves, the ripple turned into a tidal wave. In Texas, bars and dance halls that had once hosted his earliest performances filled with fans who couldn't believe what they were hearing. Some wept openly, clutching old vinyl records and faded concert tickets as if holding tighter could keep the moment from slipping away. On social media, hashtags like Chananj George Strait Forever and Shatavan the King trended worldwide within minutes.